Welcome, everybody, to OTF's On Texas Baseball. Bases loaded, I guess, is what we'll continue to call this, even though we've skipped a few weeks, guys, since the season ended. I'm Blake Munroe, joined by CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe. And, for the past few months, all we've talked about is the team. Well, we're not really going to talk about that today in that sense. We're more going to talk the portal, talk a little recruiting, all that good stuff. And, guys, Texas very active in the portal. Of course, it opened on June 1st. It runs through July 2nd. So a couple of weeks left of that. But Texas now with 5 portal commitments. You can see them up there on the screen. We're going to go through them each one by one. But all 5 of those in the 64 Analytics Top 100, guys.
They're doing some major damage, and they're adding some major bats. And I think Texas fans should be pretty excited for what this lineup could look like, especially when you consider what they might still be out there hunting for. But the big issue a year ago for me was you get guys on base, and that's about it, right? Strikeouts kind of doomed the lineup towards the back end of the season. When you face good pitching, your good sticks didn't live up to those battles, especially late in the year. And I think that's something that Texas is prioritizing this year, is going out, finding guys that can hit that elite pitching. But on top of that, finding guys that are able to find extra bases. You look at a number of guys, Caleb Freeman comes to mind, 16 home runs, 15 stolen bases. Livingston, very much the same. These guys eager to take extra bags, eager to find extra base hits. I think that's a good combination for stringing together runs that Texas just ran out of last year, to be quite frankly.
Yeah. Aiden Robbins excites me a lot when I get, I get Mark Payton vibes, just from the standpoint that I don't know if you're going to get a ton of power, if you're going to get a ton of gap power, but if you've got guys on base and he comes up in a pinch, you feel like he's going to be able to come through and deliver a base hit, just that good, reliable bat that you can count on. I really did. We're talking about Caleb Freeman from Georgia State, Josh Livingston from Wichita State, or Jack Moroknek from Butler, and then Aiden Robbins, the Seton Hall transfer. All these guys have multiple years. They're all older guys, so this isn't like not a knock on Easton Winfield, but he had only done it for 1 year at ULM before transferring in. And I think, he's in the Cape Cod League, so we'll see kind of where things go for Winfield from here. But all these guys are multi-year guys that have done it at the Division I level year after year after year. I think when you look at the transfers that Texas has taken, you think about over the years like a Skylar Messenger, a Mike Antico. Those were guys that had built up a body of work before they got to Texas. And maybe there was a little adjusting early on, but it didn't take them very long to get adjusted. And once they did, they became kind of the reliable player. Their body of work continued while they were at Texas. That's what I hope for these 4 guys. And, guys, we talked about it a lot through the season. Schloss was not shy about mentioning it. They just need depth. Texas needs depth. They need guys where you can, hey, can this guy be a first baseman? Can he be a third baseman, left field, right field, DH? The answer is yes. They're just looking for guys that can fill spots in the lineup and to go compete. And Blake, CJ, I like the fact that they're bringing in these 4 guys with what's coming back, and we'll see what happens with the high school recruiting class after the draft. Fall ball is going to be fun because all these jobs are going to be open. And I think depending on how things shake out and what the portal looks like, you could have some really, really talented guys, really good players end up transferring out maybe after fall ball when the writing's on the wall, because it's going to be a really, really competitive fall over at Dish Fall.
Yeah, for sure. And let's actually go down the list, kind of take these one by one, and we'll just start at the top. Again, these are 64 Analytics, their rankings. Of course, they have Luke Dodson, the left-handed pitcher out of Mississippi State, ranked 53. And, guys, he had 34 strikeouts and just a little over 23 innings, a fastball that went up to about 96. So adding an arm, kind of surprised we haven't seen more arms added at this point, but the first of what I assume is going to be many more arms to come for the Longhorns.
Yeah, I'm with you. A little surprised that we haven't seen more arms. I'm sure that they're on their way. Maybe that's just Texas's belief in some of these young guys. Drew Rarick, Bryce Navarro, right? We only saw them for about 6 or 7 innings this year. We'll see what their development track looks like, but they're being aggressive with the sticks. I'm sure they'll be the same with the arms on the hill. But for Dodson specifically, Texas has prioritized these guys with high K rates over 9 and 34 Ks and 23 and a third innings, if that's what it was, Blake. That's a pretty good K rate in my eyes. So, look, you need those guys with put-away stuff. We saw how valuable that was to have a Dylan Volantis back end of your rotation in that bullpen. If Dodson can be a guy just like that, especially with what I consider to be the likeliness of Volantis moving to the starting rotation, we'll see, of course, if that is the plan overall. I think he'd be a heck of a guy up there to start a Friday or Saturday. Point being, you added a really solid arm here with great put-away stuff.
Yeah, in our bases loaded group text, when Caleb Freeman committed, I made the joke to CJ. I was like, "Look, I'll settle for Django Freeman right now if it means Texas can add some pitching at some point." But no, hey, look, with Luke Dodson, a lefty power arm, that's let Max Wiener work with him and see what he can get out of him. And I think the main thing to take away from pitching is you look at the number of hit batters. And Schloss at the end of the year said it speaks more to kind of the transition the pitching staff is making right now. The leftovers from David Pierce and Chris Gordon are guys that were more, I don't want to say soft tossers, but guys that relied more on location and deception rather than just nasty stuff. If you got guys that can pound the strike zone, power arms that can pound the strike zone, that's going to cut down on your number of hit by pitches. And like I said, we saw after getting to see I think the three of us knew what it was going to be, but I think Texas fans at large know now to get through an SEC schedule, well, you better have all the power arms you can possibly fill on your roster, because everybody, even Missouri bringing up the rear, everybody's got dudes that can throw in the mid 90s and can just pump gas out of the bullpen. So that's the more power arms you can add, the better.
Yeah. And then we'll go down the list down to Caleb Freeman, who's ranked number 88. And I think if you're going to be excited about someone defensively, it has to be him. I put over on ontexasfootball.com earlier this morning that he was described as a super utility player because, I mean, you look at where all he played last year for Georgia Southern. I mean, it was just all over the field. And, he really opens it up as far as possibilities go for Texas on where you can put him, which means, where you can put other players as well. And then offensively, he goes 358 at the plate, 24 doubles, 16 home runs. So all around, I think you got to be really excited about Freeman, guys.
How about a 1.26 OPS? Sign me up. And I mentioned the stolen bases. He's a guy that had 15 as well a year ago, finding ways to get to extra stations in the base paths. That's something that I think Texas maybe didn't do enough of when given opportunities last year. This is a guy that I think absolutely will add to that aggressiveness, and those rallies that I mentioned kind of went dry towards the back end of the year.
His career trajectory is really interesting because, he goes from JUCO to Auburn, doesn't work out at Auburn, goes to Georgia State, tears the cover off the ball, playing in the Sun Belt, which, hey, I tell everybody all the time the Sun Belt is a really good baseball league, and lo and behold, Coastal's playing for it all. So don't say I didn't tell you about the Fun Belt and the quality of baseball produced in that league. But then he does it, like he tears the cover off the ball at Georgia State. So you got a guy that's basically seen it at all levels and now coming back to the SEC, see if he can do it at Texas. Maybe have a little bit of chip on his shoulder, guys, to prove that 200 season he had at Auburn was a fluke.
Yeah, for sure. And interesting, they have him listed as second base along with the next guy that we're going to talk about, Josh Livingston. I don't think either one of them will play second base at Texas this upcoming season. But, it is what it is. Josh Livingston, fellas, was, I believe, the first commit out of all these portal ones out of Wichita State. 284 at the plate, 48 RBIs, and 15 home runs. And, again, another solid guy. Going to give you quality infield play, could play, obviously second as well, but either a corner spot. So another versatile guy.
Yeah, versatility. Look, I know that this might not sound as positive on the way, but look, his numbers kind of mirror that of Max Ballou this year. I know that was limited time for Ballou, but about a 970, 980 OPS, an on-base percentage around 410. You take those type of guys, especially if you're not feeling great about the depth that you have already. I think Livingston, with what he was able to put up at Wichita State this past year, 15 home runs, 48 RBI, very consistent in his approach. Slugging dipped a little bit this year, but how about 28 walks, 16 hit by pitches? This is a guy that finds ways to get on base. I'm a fan.
A 403 on base? Sign me up, man. And again, another guy, JUCO guy, goes to Wichita State, done it at multiple levels now. was kind of a part-time player for them his first year. Really good, probably their best offensive player last year. And I know a lot of Texas fans are probably wondering, hey, man, does Wichita State actually still play baseball? Yes, they do, believe it or not. Just haven't seen them on the national scene in a very long time. But no, hey, like I said, CJ, I think that's kind of the main takeaway we've had from all these guys is, look, I know Schloss and Tulo, the approach is eliminate the fear of the strikeout. They don't want guys up there being paralyzed by strikeouts, which is great. And I get it, and it makes sense. But if you're going to strike out, I got to have you getting on base a decent amount of time too. So if you're going to take a lot of pitches, some of those strikeouts need to turn into walks or putting the ball in play or whatever. So, and I do like the fact that, we saw Casey Borba, I felt got really, really better at this, protecting the plate with 2 strikes. I thought as the year went on, he was a guy that we saw get better with that. Ethan Mendoza, once he got settled back in from the injury, was a guy that, again, protected the plate with 2 strikes, could make defensive swings, even if those resulted in strikeouts. Man, if you're getting 9, 10, 11, 12 pitch at bats early in the game, then you're going to knock somebody's starter out. You're going to get into the bullpen. That's kind of what happened with when Texas played Tennessee in the SEC tournament, knocking Liam Doyle out in the 4th or 5th inning whenever they knocked him out, just getting some of those long ABs. So bottom line is, veteran guy, high on base percentage, sign me up.
The one caveat to that, Jeff, strikeout percentage is a little bit high for Livingston, about 26, 27%. That's the one hesitancy I have with him. But hey, if you're adding a guy with the upside here, you take those chances.
The next guys we have ranked at 91, outfielder Jack Moroknek out of Butler. I mean, this is a guy that just seems to set all kinds of records. When he was at Butler, he led the team in just about every category possible, it seemed like. I know they put out, the social media graphics throughout the year, and it seemed like his name was on every single one of them. But he goes 372 this past season, 57 RBIs, which is the highest out of the 4, and then 18 home runs. Quality outfielder, phenomenal at bat.
Yeah, I know it's not always going to translate to this level of success, but anytime you're adding guys with more home runs than your leading home run guy a year ago, more RBIs than your leading RBI guy a year ago, that's a good sign. Moroknek very much in that conversation, right? Like what was his average? 438, 440. I mean, that's ridiculous. So a guy with an on-base percentage north of 500. Sign me up for a guy like that. So we'll see if that translates, of course, but set Butler's all-time record for total bags in a season as well. I talk about that aggressiveness, finding ways to get in scoring position early. This is a guy that does just that, seemingly every at-bat.
Yeah, I don't think anybody will say that the Big East is like an elite baseball league, but, I mean, it's a solid conference. I mean, hey, Mike Antico was a really good player at St. John's and ended up helping Texas get on the doorstep of a national championship coming out of the Big East. But what I like about Moroknek, what I really love about him is pretty much in the same sample size from 24 to 25, all his numbers are up. The batting average from 327 to 372. Hits go from 69 to 81. Slugging goes from 588 to 702. Like I said, those home runs, 13 in 2024, 18 last year, 16 doubles compared to 14 the year before. And again, a guy that was a 443 on base. So you're talking about a guy that's played 109 college games, started 107 of them, 350 hitter with a 427 on base. Yeah, that's a guy that, again, even if he starts a little slow, it should play out that's the kind of player he is. So I love the pickup for Texas.
Yeah, speaking on the Big East, I know Butler wasn't great in the conference, but that kind of speaks more to Moroknek's ability to hit good pitching, right? He didn't have the luxury of facing his own. Butler was only 4-17 in conference play last year. So, hey, sometimes he's not getting the luxury of facing some of his own teammates. If that
Maybe Missouri should schedule Butler next
year. Missouri needs to just fold.
Max Scherzer's not walking through that door, folks.
And then last but not least on this list, the one that you got to be excited about, Aiden Robbins. He plays outfield. An eye-popping 438 at the plate, 33 RBIs, 16 doubles, and 5 home runs. But, guys, Texas felt like he was the best batter in the portal. A huge get for the Longhorns. They beat out A&M. They beat out LSU. Everybody wanted Robbins, rightfully so. But, excited to see what he can do when he dons the burnt orange here in a little less than a year.
It feels like a perfect Max Ballou replacement. Feels like it, right? That stick, that ability to go up there and knock the cover off the ball, as we've talked about. Thank you. Yeah, put that back in right field. Feel pretty good about it. And again, talking about Seton Hall, Butler, that area that region of the country, we'll see if that translates immediately to the SEC. Point being, you got a guy with a 1.29 OPS. You're going to find ways to integrate him into the lineup. And again, big win for the Longhorns over a number of SEC schools, as you mentioned, Blake.
Yeah, this was one that I know A&M was one of the schools that was in on Aiden Robbins that didn't get him. So, you're getting him away from conference opposition. I'll be honest, guys. I haven't thought much about Seton Hall baseball since looking at the back of baseball cards when I was a kid, and Craig Biggio went to Seton Hall, so did Mo Vaughn. But other than that, haven't thought a ton about Seton Hall baseball. But again, kind of like Moroknek, the freshman numbers were what they were, similar sample size, and they went through the roof in the second year. So again, this is a guy that I'm excited to see what he does, even if it's take some time to get adjusted. I feel like specifically with Moroknek and Robbins, those are going to be the two guys that at some point they'll start to take off and they'll be what their body of work suggests they are. Kind of the Livingston's kind of a wild card for me, and then Freeman. I think it's all a matter of just where do you put him? Does he DH? Can he play a position? I think that's to be determined. But of the guys they've got, man, I'm most excited about Robbins and Moroknek.
All right, before we move on, fellas, I need to tell everybody about one of our sponsors today, and that's Tackle Addict. And if you're an avid fisherman who's always searching for the right supplies, then do yourself a favor. Check out tackleaddict.com. It's owned and operated by former Longhorn Brian Robinson and former Longhorn baseball great Braden Belt. Tackle Addict has everything you need for the best in today's fishing equipment, and it's for the everyday fisherman and serious pros alike. Get their product shipped to you directly from the shores of Lake Sam Rayburn. That's Tackle Addict, ADDICT.com. And Brian and Brandon say hook 'em. Well, we've talked portal. We're going to get in a little bit more on the portal, guys. Now, obviously we don't give away too many names, but Texas has hosted multiple visitors this week. They hosted multiple last week. And one of those names is Carson Tenny of Notre Dame. Big time catcher, guys. He was a 2025 Buster Posey Award finalist. What a get that would be. I put on Texas football in those insider notes this morning that if there's one must get, in my opinion, it's Tenny. He is a phenomenal player.
Yeah, the pursuit of Tenny, it kind of tells you what else is on the wall for the Longhorns, but look, again, 348, 17 home runs. You had 53 RBIs. Anytime you're adding guys from elite level ball with more home runs, more RBI than your leading RBI and home run getter a year ago, you're doing a pretty fine job, especially from the catching position where you saw it just this past year. That impact of your catcher being a big hitter in your lineup, that moves the needle for the entire lineup when you're able to stick an extra guy at DH out in the outfield at some of these premium positions. Carson Tenny, that's probably the biggest position name in the portal, I'll say right now, especially given that he plays catcher. I think that adds a lot of value to him. So, look, if that's one that goes the Longhorns' way, that might be the biggest addition in my eyes this entire cycle.
Yeah, you think about Schloss, I know values catching. He talked about Galvan all year, that Galvan was probably the team MVP. And sorry if I butcher his line, but he said, no good team. There has been never been a good team without a good catcher in college baseball, and never been a great team without a great catcher. And Galvan was really good. And look, we've seen through the years at Texas how much a top-notch catcher can make a difference. You look 2019, that disastrous season where, it was just, hey, does somebody have a pulse because they injuries and everything else? They just needed somebody behind the plate, and poor Michael McCann took a beating back there during the back half of the 19 season. But the difference Silas Ardwan made when he got to campus, and then Garrett Gilmette for the 1 year, and then Galvan coming in. So yeah, Texas needs a quality catcher. And I think this tells you that if they're knowing probably, Blake, what the NIL dollars it's probably going to take, the financial commitment you're going to have to make to Carson Tenny. I think that to get him on campus and to make him a priority, it tells you Texas is prepared to do that.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then two other names that they are pursuing out of the portal that we get asked about quite a bit, guys. The pair of players from Virginia, of course, their coach went to Mississippi State. They entered the portal shortly after, but that's Eric Becker, the shortstop, and Henry Ford, who can play outfield, he can play first base, and he played both for the Cavaliers this past season. But Texas, originally I didn't think they were going to really make a dent in that. I thought, that's a shoe-in to Mississippi State. They'll nothing to really look at there, but it sounds like Texas kind of making some waves there. I mean, a decision could come at any time. Now, I'm not saying the Longhorns are going to land both of them or even one of them, but I do think they're a player in that recruit in both of those recruitments. And, again, Texas trying to find, quality people that fit, pieces to the puzzle. And both of those guys are definitely pieces, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, I feel like I have some of the thoughts of the majority here, but if you're going to follow your coach in the portal to where his new destination is, you probably don't wait several weeks to make that decision unless you're really trying to angle for some crazy NIL deal, which I feel like you're probably going to get in a bidding war anyway. So that tells me that Mississippi State probably isn't the likely destination for either of these guys. I'll start with Henry Ford because, look, big-time shortstop, big bat out on the East Coast for Virginia. Right now, playing in the Cape. And his duo up the middle playing second base and shortstop for the Chatham Anglers is none other than Ethan Mendoza. So I don't know if that's going to be any sort of recruiting tool, recruiting pitch for the Longhorns, but hey, I think it's something to keep an eye on. That's for sure.
Yeah, two interesting trains of thought for me here because, and I'm not saying I have the thoughts and they're interesting. I'm talking about it's interesting in general, but I digress. Does Texas feel like they have a shortstop on the roster right now? And I think by pursuing Becker, the answer is probably no. I mean, in theory, could Adrian Rodriguez play there? Could Mendoza slide over? Would Freeman factor into that? I think the answer on all of those, if you asked Jim Schlossnagle, is probably not, which tells you why they're going after a shortstop in the portal. I know Blake will have another shortstop nugget as well here in a minute, but Henry Ford is really interesting because he's draft eligible as a sophomore. So you're talking about a guy, whether you're talking about NIL, contract negotiations, unless Henry Ford becomes an all-star down the road, he's never going to have more leverage in his baseball career than he has right now. So yes, again, kind of like we talked about Carson Tenny, you get an idea what the financial commitment's going to be, but you feel like if Ford's visiting and he's on your list and, you've gotten this far down the road, I don't think it's a leverage play for him. I think he's seriously considering staying in college. In other words, somebody's going to have to draft him and meet what's likely going to be a really, really high overslot asking price to get him to not come back to college for you. So probably nerve-wracking position if you're Schloss or any of those other coaches recruiting him. Probably nerve-wracking if you're a team that has him pretty high on your draft board. But for Ford himself, probably not a better position to be in for a baseball player ever than the one he's
probably
in.
Pretty fun.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that other shortstop nugget that you're talking about, Jeff, and that's one that we've been asked about multiple times. Of course, that recruiting process came to an end yesterday with Chris Hakopian, the Maryland shortstop, committed to A&M. But people were asking, is Texas in it? Why isn't Texas pushing? Yada yada yada. And there's a lot of speculation out there. I'm trying to think how to put this nicely. A lot of reports out there that Texas, was all in on him, and they did bring him in for a visit. They did look at him, but despite those reports out there, I don't think he was ever really a serious candidate to be at Texas, and that's more of a Texas decision than anything. So, that to me, that tells you that they feel good about other options, and you can make of that what you will.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go a different direction with the shortstop nugget. Going back to Jeff's point about bringing in Henry Ford, maybe it also kind of puts the writing on the wall for what they expect with Casey Cunningham with the MLB draft coming up. Of course, Blake, you've mentioned 80-20 kind of being that percentage in which we expect him to make it to Texas with 80 going to the MLB draft. So, look, Aggies, they get a guy, a good player. Don't get me wrong. I thought Hakopian would have been a big needle mover for the Longhorns. Point being, Texas doing a fine job prioritizing their guys elsewhere. And look, if you're in the running for Henry Ford here, we'll see where the dominoes fall there ultimately. But you're doing a fine job picking the top guys in the country to pursue.
Yeah, and I'll add to Blake's point about Chris Hakopian and info. Look, I mentioned this on the board. If it's information that might be deemed sensitive and it gets out, if they're getting their information from a staff that's recruiting a kid against Texas, or you want your program to look good, reporters in other markets there's no reason for them to withhold information that may or may not put Texas in a good light, or quite frankly, may or may not be true. So just keep that in mind. And I think it's worth reinforcing, guys, when you talk about portal recruiting, just like we see in football and basketball, there are so many moving parts, especially like you talk about a guy like Henry Ford who's draft eligible. There's going to be so much stuff out there. Sometimes you just got to separate what's true from what's not. Not everything that goes public is necessarily the truth of what's going on. So I say that to say what we do here at OTF with On Texas Baseball and with Bases Loaded, just try to bring you, whenever we're posting updates or doing a video, it's because we're trying to bring you what at that point is the most accurate information, because the stuff can change pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. Well put, Jeff. Well said, I must say. Well, before we get to our last thing, I just want to give a shout out to Vaughn Lane, fellas, because, if you're tired of flying or driving, the hassle of all that, then skip the airport stress and highway headaches. Do first class comfort with Vaughn Lane, and they've expanded to the Southeast, Nashville, Memphis, Atlanta. Be sure to check our friends out, and if you use promo code OTF25, you'll get $20 off your first trip. That's vaughnlane.com.
Everybody that rides Vaughn Lane in that commercial looks like they're having an awesome time. So I need to maybe my next trip to Dallas, I may do some Vaughn Lane action.
I know. I keep telling Bobby we need an OTF Vaughn Lane trip. That would be, an exciting time for sure.
Hey, for Texas OU.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Great idea. All right. Well, the last thing we're going to talk about, fellas, is actually high school recruiting. And I was a bit surprised last Saturday when this all came to fruition. But Texas added right-handed pitcher Hayes Holton. He's out of Louisiana, originally committed to Mississippi State. And I thought Texas was done when it came to high school recruiting in that class, because, it's a big class already. But they added him, was told that they're always going to be on the lookout for quality arms. And, Holton is definitely quality arm, 94, 97 mile an hour fastball. He has a phenomenal changeup and slider. And I actually found this clip of him I want to play y'all while we talk about him. This was from March. So, he was really just kind of getting into it in baseball season, but I had some phenomenal stuff here, as y'all can see, but a quality pickup, high school pickup for the Longhorns.
Well, I like it. The staff continues to go out there and find good arms, and that's something I think Texas should feel good about. Of course, we saw the development for a number of key guys this year as well. Only a matter of time before Texas really starts to get their own arms. And I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen a lot of movement, maybe as much as we thought in the portal when it comes to these guys on the mound. But again, I think the future looks pretty bright when you add in a Bryce Navarro, when you add in a Drew Rarick. You find guys like this late in cycles, get them to campus and see what they can become. I think we all have pretty high faith in Max Wiener to go out there and develop some high talented kids. So I like the pickup. Let's see what he's got.
I'd like to look at some data a couple years down the road, because I think probably what you'll figure out with the Schloss regime is the 2024 recruiting class that they kind of just put together on the fly. You added Rodriguez and Volantis. That class, I think, is almost going to be more productive on campus than this 25 class, probably because you're going to lose a couple of really talented guys to the draft, first off. And second off, that's usually the class where we see this in football, and to a very less extent in basketball, because basketball recruiting is so different. But we see this in football where that first quote-unquote full cycle that a staff is in a program, sometimes you tend to take guys at the beginning, and then as you get through the process, you're like, maybe we probably should have waited or taken somebody else or what have you. So I think maybe you'll see some pretty high attrition in the 25 class, but I think that 26 class, that's going to be the first cycle where Schloss and company have really gotten to dig in. They've probably been recruiting those kids for multiple years now. I think that's going to be the next class that you see a freshman come into Texas where you've got some really, really high-level players coming to campus that actually make it to campus.
Yeah, great point. All right, y'all. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Bases Loaded. We want to thank our sponsors today, Von Lane and Tackle Addict. And, of course, thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to head on over to ontexasfootball.com. Remember, we can't be on YouTube all the time, unfortunately, but we are over there at ontexasfootball.com all the time. Use promo code OTFOG when you sign up, and you can get a full year for just $39.95. That's for new first-time subscribers only. Again, promo code OTFOG at ontexasfootball.com. And obviously, we cover a lot more than football. I mean, it's every Texas sport, it seems like at this point, fellas. So we got it out there.
Hey, one more thing, Blake, if I might add, just before we wrap this up. Just remember, folks, there are 3 guarantees in life: death, taxes, and Arkansas finding new ways to lose in Omaha. So, there you
go. Oh, man, that was the one for the ages. You got to be sick if you're an Arkansas fan. Oh, good gosh. That was – I don't even have words.
Yeah, my heart just bleeds for that fan base.
Yeah, but it's, at this point, like you said, you kind of grow to expect it. All right. Well, we will maybe be back next time. We'll do Bases Loaded occasionally, maybe not weekly, but we'll have more as the news comes along. So for CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe, I'm Blake Munroe, and thanks for tuning in.